So what holiness is not doing all these things. Holiness is about your whole being transformed by the Spirit into a truly full human being.
Yeah, so holiness is less about the things that you do. It involves that, but it's more about the disposition.
Yeah,
as to why you do the things that you do.
Yeah. So it's just a way of being. Does that make sense? A way of being?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not foreign to holiness conversations. It's just
your tradition is that.
Oh
too.
yeah, and I've had many conversations about that and around what this idea of entire sanctification is, and how does that relate to spirituality. But I find as much as you try and make it not about the things that you do primarily, but more the disposition of your heart and surrender to God, I find the temptation is always to gravitate towards the things that you do and the things that you don't do.
Well, maybe that's part of the problem, is that we go, oh, so what's holiness? Oh, it's this. And then we get back to the conversation that you started off with. It then becomes a formula.
Yeah.
And so it's not Christ who becomes the center of who my following is. It becomes an idea of what holiness looks like.
Yeah. True.
And then that becomes the sort of benchmark of judging other people. They're not as good as that, and they don't measure up. So I go, well, maybe the problem is that we start to conceptualize that, idolize that, and that becomes part of a sort of a Phariseeism. I'm like a Pharisee. I'm not like that other person. I don't really necessarily think about holiness, but I think if our lives are walking walking in the way of Jesus is a whole lifetime, and I don't think I'll ever get there. And it changes because age changes and your body changes and circumstances changes. So there's different challenges in different ways, parts of the way through.
So to pick up, you mentioned something really important. It depends on where you think the aim or the goal is. Actually determines how you react and what you do, right? So you said if holiness is the goal, then of course the things that you do and you don't do matter a whole lot more. If Jesus is the goal and you know Jesus, then that matters not as much, because the pursuit isn't looking a certain way. The pursuit is getting close to someone who is the way.
And so what does that look like? Thinking about the stories, reading around the stories. I mean, there's certain little practices. I mean, spiritual reading is something that I do because it helps me.
Yeah.
It might be anybody else's sort of game, but I find like reading like this one, New Seeds of Contemplation. I think Jonathan mentioned.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to get that and read it. And so I'll read it and kind of chew on it and think about it, and that helps my spiritual life. So I don't know what you call that as a discipline. Don't know.
No, well, here's the thing. So in my tradition, because we have this doctrine called entire sanctification, or being perfected in love, is the argument or the understanding that because of God's great grace in your life and because of the Spirit's work in your life, God can change you to the point and make you holy to the point of not wanting or desiring to sin or to do anything that would cause sin. And so that as like a pillar of like pursuit, I think has unintentionally tainted the pursuit of holiness, because I think people are less, at least initially, are less after, even though they want to say it's not true, less after Jesus and more after the results of Jesus, more after what Jesus does for them.
I think you're onto something there.
And if that's the case, then of course the externals matter a whole lot more than the internals, because you're trying to conform to what you think this image of holiness looks like, when in reality that could actually look, principally it looks the same across cultures and across times and societies, but practically it looks different because of culture and because of society, because of time that you live in. And I think my denomination, at least more in Atlantic Canada, but where I grew up, I feel like that's that the pursuit's been the wrong way around.